Now the hungry lion roars, and the wolf behowls the moon, whilst the heavy ploughman snores, all with weary task fordone.
Now the wasted brands do glow, whilst the screech owl, screeching loud, puts the wretch that lies in woe in remembrance of a shroud.
Now it is the time of night, all the graves are gaping wide, every one lets forth its sprite, in the churchway paths to glide.
And we fairies that do run by the triple Hecate's tea, from the presence of the sun, following darkness like a dream.
Good evening, and welcome to tonight's performance. We thank you all for coming and supporting our aspiring young wordsmiths as part of our Canterbury Shakespeare Festival. And speaking of fears, as I often do, let me read you some of mine. Late at night, the world sleeps, and I am here alone. And here I come some nights to confront my fears. They're here, my fears. They're always with me, lurking, scurrying, hiding, and waiting. They come, and then they go. But though they are gone, they are never far. And here, alone at night, I can confront them. There they are, confronted fears. Fears of hunger, fears of pain, fears of missing the last train, fears of dentists always drilling, fears that no one will be willing to see me as I really am. But once they are counted and compelled, they may quickly be dispelled, like figments of my own imagination. But always there are other fears. Fears of snakes, fears of cats, fears of maitre d's and rats, an irrational black terror that I might someday get fat. Fears of elevators falling and the taxman someday calling, and the accidental walling of myself up inside a dark, dingy cellar. But once they are counted and compelled, they may quickly be dispelled. But then, there are those other fears. Fears of bullets, there's a dread. Fear of baldness on my head. Fear of waking up one morning to discover I am dead. But once they are counted and compelled, they may quickly be dispelled, like figments of my own imagination. But then there is that last fear, just about the time when I'm past fear, the one that really is final. It will come, yours and mine'll, in the darkest of the night. It will come without a fight. It will count me and compel me. It will casually dispel me, for I am just a figment of its own imagination.
Thus, in this strange and sad habiliment, I will encounter with Andronicus, and say I am revenge, sent from below to join him, and to right his heinous wrongs. Knock upon his study, where they say he keeps to ruminate strange plots of dire revenge. Tell him revenge has come to join him, and to work confusion among his enemies.
Who doth molest my contemplation? Is it your trick to make me ope the door so that my sad decrees may fly away and all my study be to no effect? Thou art deceived. For what I mean to do, see here in bloody lines I have set down, and what is written shall be executed.
Titus, I am come to talk with thee.
No, not a word. How can I grace my talk without a hand to give it action? Thou hast the odds for me, therefore no more.
If thou didst know me, thou wouldst speak with me.
I am not mad. I know thee well enough. Witness this wretched stump. Witness these crimson lines. Witness these trenches made by grief and care. Witness tiring day and heavy night. Witness all sorrow that I know thee well. For our proud empress, mighty tomorrow, is not thy coming from my other hand.
Know thou, sad man, that I am not tomorrow, for she is thy enemy, and I am thy friend. I am revenge, sent from the infernal kingdom to ease the gnawing vulture of thy mind by working wreakful vengeance against thy foes. Come down, and welcome me to this world's light. Confer with me of murder and of death. There is no hollow cave nor lurking place, no vast obscurity or misty veil, where bloody murder and detested rape can couch for fear, but I will find them out, and in their ear whisper my dreadful name. Revenge. It makes the foul offender quake.
Art thou revenge? And art thou sent to be a torment to mine enemies?
I am. Now come down and welcome me.
Do me some service ere I come to thee. Lo, by thy side where rape and murder stands, now give some assurance that thou art revenge. Stab, or tear them on thy chariot wheel, and then up be thy waggoner, and whirl along with thee about the globe. Provide thee 2 proper palfreys, black as jet, to hail thy vengeful waggon, and find out murderers in their guilty caves. And when thy car is loaden with their heads, I will dismount, and by thy waggon wheel trot, like a servile footman, even from Hyperion's rising in the east until his very downfall in the sea, and day by day I'll do this heavy task. So thou destroy, rape, and murder here.
They are my ministers, and come with me.
Are they thy ministers? What are they called?
Murder and rape, therefore call it so, because they take vengeance on such kind of men.
Good Lord, how like the Empress's sons they are, and you the Empress. But we worldly men have miserable, mad, mistaking eyes. Oh, sweet revenge, now I do come to thee, and if one arm's embracement will content thee, I'll embrace thee in it, by and by.
This closing with him fits his lunacy. Whatever I forge to feed his brain-sick mind, do you maintain and uphold in your speeches. For now he truly takes me for revenge. And being credulous in this mad thought, I'll make him send for Lucius, his son, and whilst I at a banquet hold him firm, I'll find some cunning practice out of hand to scatter and disperse the giddy Goths, or at the least make them his enemies.
Oh, hail Macbeth, who shall be king hereafter. Hail to thee, things portable. Oh, hail Macbeth,
Who shall be king hereafter.
Is this a dagger I see before me? The handle towards my hand, come let me clutch thee. I have thee not, and yet I see thee still. Art thou not, fatal vision, sensible to feeling as to sight? Or art thou but a dagger of the mind, a false creation proceeding from the heat-oppressed brain? I see thee, in form as palpable as which now I draw. Thou marshallest me the way that I was going, and such an instrument I was to use. Mine eyes are made fools of the other senses. Else worth all the rest, I see thee still. And on thy blade and dudgeons gouts of blood which was not so there before. It is no such thing. It is the bloody business which informs thus to mine eyes.
sleep no more. Macbeth doth murder sleep. Sleep no more. Macbeth doth murder sleep.
Now, over the half-world nature seems dead, and wicked dreams abuse the curtained sleep. Witchcraft celebrates pale Hecate's offerings. Withered murder alarmed by his sentinel the wolf, whose howls his watch and stealthy pace, with Tarquin's ravishing strides, move like a ghost towards his design. Thou sure And firm set earth hear not my steps, for fear thy very stones prate my whereabout, and take with them the present horror of the time. Whilst I threat, he lives. Words of a heat of thee too cold breath gives. I go. The bell invites me. Hear it not, Duncan, for it is a knell that summons thee to heaven or to hell.
Before we continue with tonight's performances, I'd just like to announce what we're going to be doing in the summer of next year. I know some of you are very excited, and some of you couldn't care less. We will begin our summer season with The Tempest. This will be, indeed, this will be followed by Measure for Measure. Yes, less woo, it's not as famous. Then we'll be doing not one, but two productions by Afra Ben. We will be doing The Younger Brother, which will then be followed by Emperor of the Moon. Afra Ben is a local playwright. A statue of her will be going up in the High Street in the not too distant future, so we thought it was an appropriate time to be doing some of her work. And then we'll be finishing off our season with King Lear.
Wow.
Yes, indeed. Wow. We can't believe it either. Next, however, we have the first of our stories written by one of our young writers, Ismay Davis. She's a very talented young lady. She's written this next story for you. It's called Alone in the Dark, Something You Never Should Be.
It happens when you're alone. There are no recorded instances of the change being witnessed by a second party, and believe me, we did look. No, in every case, the victim was alone when it happened. Why do you think we go everywhere in pairs? To be honest, we still aren't entirely sure why. The scientists think maybe it's something to do with the observer effect, Schrodinger's cat and all that shit. Me, I've got a different theory. I reckon whatever it is that's doing it, and I'm pretty sure there is something, some intelligence behind it. I reckon whatever it is, it's hunting. Picking off the stragglers, you know. Pretty standard predator behaviour. Dr. Connor says I'm ascribing meaning, but I'll tell you this for free. You don't survive the kind of shit I've survived in the places I've been to without having a pretty good instinct when something's hunting you. I suppose it's up to who you believe. Whatever the reason, it doesn't take long, we know that. A moment's separation is enough to leave a person vulnerable, duck into the bathroom and... You know, we captured some of them. The changed. Early on, that is, before there got to be more of them than we could handle. They ran tests, just standard stuff at first, the kind of stuff you'd run on any person in for a proper medical checkup. Then, when that didn't get any answers, the tests got more invasive. Still nothing bad, you understand, just minor biopsies, like they do on suspected cancer patients. Painful, yes, but not unethical or anything. That was all it was at first, but then things started to get bad. They started to get bad quickly, and people were scared. And look, you understand, at the time, we honestly thought we might find a solution that way. So the boss asked to speak with the doctors, all of them. They were in together for a while. I don't know what was said. All of us guards were sent out, but the doctors came out with this look on their faces. Pale and hollow and cold. The way people get when... Look, you have my file, right? You know I've been involved in things that... Well, anyway, I'd seen that look on people a couple of times before, when they believed absolutely that something was unforgivable, and they also believed just as surely that it had to be done. That kind of look never goes well for anyone involved. After that, the tests involved more extreme measures. I'm not going to say whether it was right or wrong, what we did. God knows, none of us had any better plans. But it wasn't a good thing. It wasn't the kind of thing you get to do and then go to heaven after, if you get my meaning. Dr. Martins killed himself not long after they started. And Dr. Shannon hasn't been quite right since. Not all the way unable to function crazy, but not exactly what you'd call stable either. I don't want to talk about Dr. Berner. Yes, I know I have to anyway. I know what a report is. Just give me a minute, okay? Yeah. Dr. Berner scared me after that business started up. Scared all of us, really. The other doctors, well, they weren't doing so hot. Martin's was the only suicide, but they were all drinking heavy, and honestly, none of us blamed them. Berner, though, he liked it. You could see it in his eyes. Not at first. At first, he was just as bothered by the idea as the rest of them, but after the first time he got the knives out on one of the subjects, it changed him. Or maybe it made him realise something that had always been there. I don't know, but he liked cutting them up, and he liked the screaming, and they still looked like people, you understand. And at the time, we thought, maybe we could get cured. Maybe they could be people again. People tried to avoid getting treated by him after that. He was never unprofessional, that's not what I'm saying. He did his job and never laid a finger on anyone he wasn't ordered to. He never did anything to any of us, never touched us in any way that wasn't to fix up injuries, but he liked it. The things he was ordered to do, and sometimes I could feel him looking. He made us uncomfortable, is all I'm saying. Do I think he should have been brought up on charges? Hell if I know. But he didn't do anything the rest of us didn't. Not really. Sure, he liked it in ways that weren't quite right, but it's not the liking that makes the thing a crime, it's the doing, and all of us had a hand in the doing. Yes, I include myself in that. Maybe I wasn't holding the scalpel, but I guarded the door and helped strap them down and watched, and I never said a word of protest. And I knew, even then I knew it wasn't right or forgivable. But you've got my file. You know it wasn't my first time on that go-around, and you have to understand, at the time it seemed the only thing we could do. The only way we could even try to help those poor buggers. Well, of course, now I know a mercy kill is the only decent option, but remember, back then we still thought it might be curable. Or at least manageable. They still looked like people, sounded like people. It didn't seem so impossible that we might get them to be people again.
Once upon a midnight drear, while I pondered, weak and weary, over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as of someone gently rapping at my chamber door. "'Tis some visitor," I muttered, tapping at my chamber door. Only this, and nothing more. Distinctly I remember, it was in the bleak December, and each separate dying ember wrought its ghost upon the floor. Eagerly I wished the morrow, vainly I had sought to borrow from my books surcease of sorrow for the lost Lenore, for the rare and radiant maiden whom the angels name Lenore, nameless here forevermore. And the silken, sad, uncertain rustling of each purple curtain filled me with fantastic terrors never felt before, so that now to still the beating of my heart I stood repeating, "'Tis some visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door, some late visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door. This is it, and nothing more." Presently my soul grew stronger, hesitating then no longer. "Sir," said I, "or madam, truly your forgiveness I implore. But the fact is I was napping, and so gently you came rapping, and so faintly you came tapping at my chamber door, that I scarce was sure I heard you. Here I opened wide the door. Darkness there, and nothing more. Deep into that darkness peering, long I stood there, wondering, fearing, doubting, dreaming dreams no mortal ever deemed to dare before. But the silence was unbroken, and the stillness gave no token and the only word there spoken was the whispered word, Lenore? This I whispered, and an echo murmured back the word,
No.
merely this, and nothing more. Back into the chamber turning, all my soul within me burning, soon again I heard a tapping, somewhat louder than before. Surely, said I, surely that is something at my window lattice. Let me see what thereat is, and this mystery explore. Let my heart be still a moment, and this mystery explore. 'Tis the wind, and nothing more. Open here I flung the shutter, when with many a flirt and flutter, in there stepped a stately raven of the saintly days of yore. Not the least obeisance made he, not a minute stopped or stayed he, but with mine of lord of lady, perched above my chamber door. Perched upon a bust of Pallas, just above my chamber door. Perched and sat, but nothing more. Then this ebony bird beguiling my sad fancy into smiling, by the grave and stern decorum of the countenance it wore. Though thy crest be shorn and shaven, thou, I said, art shorn, O craven, ghastly grim and ancient raven, wandering from the nightly shore. Tell me what thy lordly name is on the night's Plutonian shore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Startled at the stillness broken by reply so aptly spoken, doubtless, said I, what it utters is its only stock and store, caught from some unhappy master, whom unmerciful disaster followed fast and followed faster, till his songs one burden bore, till the dirges of his hope that melancholy burden bore, of never, nevermore. But the raven, still beguiling all my fancy into smiling, straight I wheeled a cushioned seat in front of bird and bust and door. Then upon the velvet sinking, I betook myself to linking, fancy unto fancy, thinking what this ominous bird of yore, what this grim, ungainly, ghastly, gaunt, and ominous bird of yore meant in croaking nevermore. This I sat, engaged in guessing, but no syllable expressing, to the fowl whose fiery eyes now burned into my bosom's core. This and more I sat divining, with my head at ease reclining on the cushion's velvet lining, than the lamplight gloated o'er, but whose velvet violet lining with the lamplight gloating o'er, she shall press, nevermore. Then, methought, the air grew denser, perfumed from some unseen censer, swung by seraphim whose footfalls tinkled on the tufted floor. Wretch, I cried, thy God hath lent thee, by these angels he hath sent thee, respite and nepenthe from thy memories of Lenore. Quoth this kind nepenthe, and forget this lost Lenore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Prophet, said I, thing of evil, prophet still, if bird or devil, by that heaven that pens above us, by that God we both adore. Tell this soul with sorrow laden, if within the distant Aidenn it shall clasp a sainted maiden, whom the angels name Lenore. Clasp a rare and radiant maiden, whom the angels name Lenore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Be that word our sign of parting, bird or fiend, I shrieked upstarting, get thee back into the tempest and the night's Plutonian shore. Leave no black plume or as a token of that lie thy soul hath spoken. Leave thy my loneliness unbroken. Quit the bust upon my door. Take thy beat from out my heart, and take thy form from off my door. Quoth the raven, nevermore. And the raven, never flitting, still is sitting, on the pallid bust of Pallas, just above my chamber door. And his eyes have all the seeming of a demon's that is dreaming, and the lamplight o'er him streaming throws his shadow on my floor, and my soul from out that shadow that lies floating on the floor shall be lifted nevermore.
Had I not done 1,000 dreadful things? Even now I curse the day And yet I think few escaped the compass of my curse, wherein I did some notorious ill, as kill a man and devise his death, ravish a maid and plot the way to do it, accuse some innocent and forswear myself, set deadly enmity between two friends, make poor men's cattle, break their necks, and set fires to their barns and haystacks in the night, and bid the owners quench them with their tears. Oft have I digged up dead men from their graves, and set them upright at their dear friend's door, when all their sorrows were almost forgot. And on their skins, as on the bark of trees, have, with my knife carved, in Roman letters, let not your sorrows die, though I am dead. I have done 1,000 dreadful things, as willingly as one would kill a fly. And what grieves me heartily indeed is that I cannot do 10,000 more.
Before we continue with our final two stories for the evening, if you've enjoyed what you've seen and would like to join our writers group, we heartily advise that you do. We meet on the last Wednesday of the month at the number 10 bar at what used to be the Pilgrims Hotel at 7:30. We don't ask that you write like Shakespeare or even Marlowe, just have to be able to write. Our final two stories this evening come from two of our young aspiring writers. The first is a terrifying tale called The Barfly, written by Charlotte Groombridge. And the second is called Awake. It's by Harry Stemple. And believe me, after you've heard it, you'll have trouble sleeping.
All men are born sinners. I have seen enough of the world to know that that is true. But if men are born sinners, what of women? Do we possess the same black souls as men, or are our sins simply not worthy of consideration? A strange thing to begin a suicide note with a philosophical musings, but then this is a strange sort of suicide. Perhaps a more standard beginning is in order. If I have learnt anything from this affair, it's this. There's good reason for protocol. This is the complete confession of Sergeant Helen Hobbs, who died without distinction, without pity, and hopefully without 20 years on the force. A tediously long career, never quite reaching distinguished, though with good enough thrown about in the world to negate the dark stains of a corrupted soul. To dedicate one's life to the pursuit of justice, to the protection of every citizen of this miserable little island, no matter how pathetic, there can be no egotistical motivations behind such a choice. Certainly, you receive little gratitude for your sacrifices, whilst most of the pathetic citizens regard you with nothing short of outright hostility. Your victories sink into oblivion, and your failure is a weak man's game, a blight, a sickness spreading its decay within you. There is no room for failure in our line of work. It means another life lost, another guilty man walking free. Can anyone understand that pressure? Even your colleagues, your veritable brothers in arms, struggle to comprehend how one mistake can weigh on the soul. To err is human, is what they say, until it happens to them. Until they are faced with a choice between accepting a mistake and doing anything in their power to fix it. We don't speak of it, of course. But every colleague has done something that blurs the lines of ethics. Surely they must have, yet I still believe they remain good people. Good people born with sin. And that is something they can hardly be blamed for. Perhaps I have sinned more than most. It doesn't matter now. All I have left is one final act of repentance to wipe the slate clean. And I can leave behind a slightly better world than the one I entered. My mortal soul, that is something which I have no concern for. I never much believed in divine intervention. There are no earthly rewards nor cosmic judgments awaiting us. There is only what small justice we can create on earth. Before this is over, I want to put on the record that I fully believed in his guilt. And everything I did was in pursuit of justice. A misguided pursuit, yes. I admit that. I know mistakes were made, but you have to see this from my position. He was a murderer. Worse, he was a monster about to walk free, ready to kill again and again, with nothing any of us could do to stop. No, this isn't the way. This story, he deserves for this story to be told right, concise, and with nothing but the facts. His name must be cleared, and as for my reputation, well, who cares about the reputation of a lowly police sergeant who never dared do a thing to distinguish herself from the rank and file? I fear this will be difficult for you to understand, whoever you are. It will be difficult to understand what drove me to such actions. Actions against my conscience, actions against everything I stand for, or stood for. Not unless you saw the crime scenes. Barbaric. An inappropriate word to describe what we found, but it is good as any as the equally ineffectual words barbaric, visceral, repugnant, nightmarish, ungodly. That is probably the most appropriate of the lot. God has committed so many horrific crimes, yet this would not touch him in his darkest moments. And the question which plagued us from the beginning, how to describe a man behind the crimes? Because it undoubtedly was a man, a predator, feasting on the weak-willed girls who frequent lonely pubs and bars, longing for a free drink and a kind word that come with it. That was the origin of the tabloid's ridiculous name, the Barfly. A name which overlooked the obvious point. Flies are not predators. They are vermin, which feast on infested, bloated corpses already strewn in the streets, spreading decay wherever they land and turning all to rot. Though that is not miles away from what he did, what he is still doing. No, I will not stoop to using that name. Nor will I use the equally ineffectual romantic term serial killer. It achieves nothing except conjuring images of a lurking shadow flitting back and forth in the dark streets, an evil from which we bar our doors, keep on our lights, and cower in submission until the shadow finally passes. How then, you may well ask, do we describe this man? Monster is too trite. Strips him of his humanity. He is not a monster. He is a man. A man born a sinner. The first body, Alice Bridges, she was found in her flat. He always takes them back to their own home. Women tend to think it's safer, that there is some sort of protection to be found on their own turf. There was no safety for Alice Bridges. Before we found the second victim, all of us knew what we were dealing with. Already we were trawling through cold cases, looking for something we missed, the first victim, and we found nothing. Alice Bridges was the first, and quite an entrance too. He cut her from neck to torso. Her ribcage cracked open, entrails spread across the room. The original report said artistically, before the chief ordered the word be removed. Said it was distasteful. I disagreed. The display was gruesome, but we were clearly dealing with an artist. Or a chef. No, I can't get into that right now. I've had a lot of time to think this over, and I'm certain that was the start of our failures. No one blamed us for the first victim. You can't catch criminals before they commit a crime. Even the second victim is subject to a little leeway, but the third, the fourth. Sarah Breeden was found in the bathroom, her skin pulled back, her intestines looped over and over the shower curtain rail. Well, most of her was found there. Some parts were in the kitchen and some parts were never found. Elizabeth Bracken was in the hallway. The full length of the hallway. That's not that much of a challenge. We are filled with meters of intestines and sorted offal. Not all of hers were present, but we knew where to look for it. And another thing we knew, the MO, the pattern beginning at last. All of the victims had last names beginning with B. Here, our second mistake. Our arrogance in predicting the moves of a maniac. So sure were we that we even announced it to the press. Women with surnames beginning with B should take extra precautions. It garnered the usual backlash, as well as our fair share of ridicule once the fourth victim was found, Sharon Peters, in the guest room, not with the lead pipe. No, with an instrument of far more precision. I can't lose myself in those scenes again. I've spent too many nights trapped in those rancid rooms, breathing in foul stenches, checking my clothes for stray spots of blood. Those scenes infest my life, and there's only one escape from them now. I can still smell the failure. No matter how many times I shower, failure is a potent stench. By this time, we were getting murdered in the press. Preferable to being murdered in your home, I guess, but just barely. Soon I won't have to guess. 4 bodies, and no further to catching the killer. Certainly we deserved nothing less than what we got. And not for the first time, I was glad for my virtual anonymity. My apparent inability to deal with the public meant I was kept away from press conferences and forbidden from talking to reporters. How useful that has become now. Fate is a funny thing. As the bodies piled up, there was one thing both the tabloids and the police agreed upon. He was laughing at us. He still is. I can see him even now, watching each press conference whilst cutting out the myriad of stories which fills the newspapers, enjoying his 15 minutes of fame, smirking at our vain attempts to track him down. That smirk haunts me more than the crime scenes. And though they'll never admit it, the press loved our failure. Each anguished headline was tinged with hope that the horror would last just a little bit longer. Nothing they came up with could compare to the gruesome truth. They say newspapers are a dying medium. I like to think we did our part in fending off its inevitable death for a time. The same can't be said for Catherine Hartland. 5 victims, that was the limit. We swore we would not allow another woman to prey to this. Well, after that, every spare officer was put on the case. No doubt allowing dozens of lesser criminals to slip through our nets, and if you saw our numbers, you'd know how true that is. But sacrifice is a necessary part of peacework. I have always believed that. And the sacrifices paid off in the end. We didn't find a sick victim. We found our man instead. I can't bear to write his name. It tightens the knot that has never left my stomach, but I must do it. Not for you. You are only a very small part of this. The poor soul blithely walking into a horrific scene, that will never leave your mind. I think of you quite often. Who you will be, what you will do, if you will forgive me. A colleague. Most likely you are a colleague. Someone I've probably met in passing. I can't say I have many friends on the force, so this won't affect you more than the usual crime scene. And if you are a colleague, you already know his name. Hell, the entire country knows his name. But I have to write it. I owe him that much, to write his name in this confession, even though I will not live long enough to clear it. Perhaps this note will help, or perhaps it will make no difference. It's all I have, and I can do nothing now except hope. Albert Walters. An innocuous name for a serial killer. That was to be expected. The world is full of evil Alberts and Johns and Marks. Hell, even Ripper was a Jack. And he was a data entry assistant. He was an assistant to someone whose job was data entry. Can you imagine? It all fit. Serial killers, not exactly hidden geniuses. If I was to be asked to put money on it, I'd say the main motivations behind these crimes is boredom. Boredom so deep it drives you to desperate insanity, and Albert Walters, he was bored. Please, I need you to understand. You must understand. I truly believed in the guilt of Albert Walters. The man wasn't a saint, regardless of whatever else he was innocent of, and that smirk, I wanted to wipe it clean off his face. Do I hate the man? Yes, I won't deny it. I hate Albert Walters. It is a completely professional hate. And after what I have seen, there is no room for any other emotion, not pity, not revulsion, just pure hate. What he did, what I thought he'd done, it lit a fire within me. It's the reason I hounded him so fervently. The pathetic, scrawny man with the internet history of a school shooter and the criminal past of a rapist in the making. The smirking cretin who knew we never had enough to convict him. In fact, we had nothing more than a bunch of circumstantial evidence and a bad feeling. That, and an inescapable desire for not justice, but relief. Something, anything, to get the press off our backs. No, we didn't have the evidence. We knew it. The press knew it. Walters knew it. So I made the evidence. I know. Haven't I already told you that it went against everything I believed in? But what else could I do? The man was guilty. I knew. I believed. I really did believe Albert Walters was guilty. And the ease with which it took to fake the evidence only added to my convictions. To see his face when we confronted him with the witness statements, the call logs, the traces of his DNA recovered from the crime scenes, that self-satisfied smirk giving way to confusion, then anger, and finally blind panic. Of course he professed his innocence. It's what criminals do. But he could offer no alibis. Always at home, no friends, a loner type. And a clear woman hater. The word incel was thrown around more than once, and he never denied it. He never denied it. Would Albert Walters have been convicted for the murders of Alice Bridges, Sarah Breeden, Elizabeth Bracken, Sharon Peters, and Catherine Harland if he ever saw his day in court? It's a question that continues to keep me awake in the depths of the night, so frustrating that it will go forever unanswered. Because whilst the press were baying for blood, the police congratulating themselves on a job well done, and the families weeping to every disreputable journalist they could find, Albert Walters was forced to consider the bleak future which awaited him. Stronger men than Walters have broken just as fast. What chance was there for a loner like him? He hanged himself in his cell not a week before the trial, which of course you know was in the news for months. That's where this should have ended. We thought it was over, finally over. Yet with each passing day, I couldn't shake the feeling that justice had not been served, and now I know why. The transcripts from those awful internet forums, some smart aleck in cybercrimes, managed to find the more seedy parts of Walter's internet footprint. He was actively posting to them at the times of 3 of the killings. An alibi at last. Which came too late for the woman-hating Albert Walters, already swinging from the ceiling of his cell. Apologies, my dear colleague. I tend to wax poetic from time to time. But if not in my own suicide note, then when? I buried the evidence. I had to. It was easy enough to fake evidence, burying it with a fraction of the effort. It's the only thing I feel guilty about now. Knowing that I could have done something to prevent the sick death if I had been willing to admit my mistakes. If I had the courage to. Alice Jenkins. How appropriate to end where it began. I didn't attend the scene. Besides, a murderer never returns to the scene of a crime, and that death lays squarely at my door. Alice Jenkins and Albert Waters. Now here we are. You've read the papers. You know they have already dubbed the latest murder the work of a copycat. Only I know the truth that others are starting to suspect, and so, my dear colleague, do you. This has gone on too long. Yet I couldn't tell the story any other way. Like I said, this is a strange kind of suicide note because it is a strange kind of suicide. I've been tracking him for a while now. He doesn't hit the same places twice, never has. But I know his preferred hunting ground, and for all his anonymity, there is one thing he can't hide. I saw it last week, and the same thing 3 days ago. He was on the hunt, the barfly at home and ready to feed, still wearing that same smirk. He latched on to me quicker than I had planned. I guess I've spent enough time in his file to know his type. Tonight is the night. I can sense it. Feels like this has dragged on already, and a smart man savours his final meal. You have found me dead in my modest flat. And I am not alone. The plan is solid. It had to be airtight. Something I can feel proud of at last. He'll follow me without hesitation, and what harm is there in accepting a drink from your pitiful victim? Still, plans go awry, and a certain amount of fluidity is necessary in any sting operation. I won't end up like the others. I won't be torn apart while still alive, writhing in my own blood and begging for my life. I'll make sure any bite he takes from me will be his last. You can't get arsenic out of flesh. Did you know that? Swallow one small drop and it sinks in. A corruption that can't be washed away. You shoot cows, you don't poison. Otherwise the corruption spreads, leaving a path of destruction in its wake. Hopefully he'll be dead long before it comes to that. It will be a clean death. I'm looking for justice, not vengeance. And if I'm being honest, a slither of salvation wouldn't go amiss. Here then are the final musings of Sergeant Helen Hobbs, who dies without distinction, without pity, and hopefully without guilt. Is it pointless to apologize? Probably. I became numb to the guilt a long time ago. Still, the night is young, and the barflies are circling. The horrors will end here. My final promise to a desperate world. The press are really gonna love this.
It was raining. You were late. You didn't technically have to go, but your boss had made it clear that anyone who didn't attend wasn't showing the right kind of team-building attitude. The Christmas party had been a bust. Tom's wife had cornered you with a terrible breath, and someone wildly underestimated how much wine would be required. So you weren't holding high hopes for the John watched a TED talk about how parties are good for morale party. So there you were, tying your shoes, grabbing your keys, giving your dog's head a quick scratch as you hurried out the door. You pulled out of the driveway and into the downpour. Conditions were horrendous, but you're a good driver and you know these roads well. You couldn't see more than 30 feet in front of the car, and the rain in the headlights kept reminding you of going to hyperspace. Admittedly, you were also doing 15 over the limit. You certainly didn't see the van that had stopped in the road. The door opened abruptly, and you'll never forget the look on the delivery driver's face as he stepped out in his hoodie and high vis. You swerved, and everything went dark. Time passed. You were awake. You could hear people talking nearby and the patter of heavy rain on the metal roof. There was something clipped to your finger and a weight around your chest. You felt a terrible pain in your neck and shoulder, and you faded out again. As more of your senses returned, you could feel the energy in the now open room, with you as the still center of a hurricane of human activity in every direction. The air was astringent and stung your eyes, which were closed. You tried to open them, but they were too heavy, and the harsh light shone through nonetheless. The weight on your chest disappeared, and you tried to move, but your leaden arms wouldn't obey. A terrible thought that had been lurking in the back of your mind began to drag its way to the fore. You couldn't move. You hadn't moved since the crash. How long had it been? A few hours, surely. A gloved hand touched your face, and you felt the tack of the latex. Two thick fingers pried open your left eye, and for the first time in hours you saw again. A dark-skinned man with bright eyes and a shaved head peered down at you. He was wearing pale green scrubs and held a small torch in his other hand. You tried desperately to speak, to move, to look at the man with your life in his hands, but even your eyes refused you. You noticed the sadness on his face as you were once again plunged into darkness. All hands off, time of death 22:57. Time passed. It had been dark for a while. You were somewhere quiet and cold. You tried to focus on the clatter of the wonky wheel of whatever cart they had used to move you, but you had been trapped in the stillness for hours. When would someone notice that you were still here, that you were alive, and that they had made a mistake? The pain in your neck had continued to radiate out in a relentless throb, each wave of agony sending frustratingly imaginary tingles across your unresponsive skin. The lack of sensation felt like being stuck behind glass. You had decided that was the problem. You must have broken your neck in the crash. You were paralyzed or paraplegic? What was the difference? You supposed it didn't matter all that much if you were stuck in some basement, wherever you were. If nobody noticed, you would just lay there in pain until you starved to death. Panic gripped at you again. You wanted to scream, to cry, to shake the table until someone, anyone, came to see you, to save you. But all you could do was wait. You had settled into a sort of fugue as the hours passed. You half listened to what was happening in the room as though from a dream. The oppressive silence was broken so gently you hardly noticed. A skittering down by the floor, and the smallest snuffling of the still air. The table shook a little as whatever creature had joined you in the room climbed closer. You had always hated rats. Your dad had read you these books when you were little, about mice and moles and other woodland critters going on adventures and sword fighting. One of the villains was a big rat with one eye, and he had terrified you. An overwhelming swell of grief filled your stomach at that thought. It seemed that if things kept going the way they were, you would never see your dad again. You felt something brush against your naked foot. Minuscule claws gripping at your toe. Panic! Followed by sharp pain as teeth sunk into your frozen flesh. You were being eaten. Something was taking a bite out of you, and you were powerless to stop it. Animal instinct told you to run, to kick out, yell and growl and fight and flee in disgust and rage, but all you could do was lay there and be eaten by vermin. You wished you could sob. Time passed. The autopsy technician had been very unhappy to find that your foot had been nibbled on. Not as upset as you, of course, but given the circumstances, you would admit you had an unfair head start on outrage. This was it, the last chance. No, it was important to be positive. The best chance of someone finally noticing that you were in the wrong place, that you desperately needed medical help if you were ever going home. For the 1000th time, you wished you could move even a millimetre to alert the woman, or even open an eye so that you could at least have a better idea of what was going on around you. Another gloved hand, smaller this time, but handling you much more roughly, opened both your eyes, and the stark surgical light flooded your perception with a solar ferocity. You wondered how long ago they had been open. Certainly hours, possibly days, since the man in the scrubs declared you dead. The technician had a long face framed by a honey-blonde bob, and her breath smelled of nicotine gum. She looked a bit like a girl you had known in school. Something about the set of the mouth, an unused dimple long ago given over to consternation. Subject was in a fatal traffic collision on the 26th of October at approximately 20:45. No signs of intoxication. Declared dead at 22:57 after being transported to local A&E. She spoke into a small mic mounted on a wheeled desk. This was it. She'd notice. Your body had become this meat prison, but you were still in here, for fuck's sake. She had to notice. The first incision was long and painful. A line of white-hot fire beginning at the bottom of your throat and travelling down to your waist. 2 horizontal lines joined it on either end, high on your chest and low on your abdomen. I'm being unzipped, you thought, in a mad moment of clarity through the haze of pain and terror. But this was the moment that it would all be okay. This woman would see your heart beat and your lungs inflate, and... Had you been breathing? You remembered the terrible stillness of your body, the suffocating inability to move even the smallest part of yourself. You must have been breathing. All this time? The technician placed your heart in the tray beside your table. Time passed. The coffin was small, snug even. You could feel soft fabric against the back of your neck, your clothes chosen for you by your sister. A small pillow in such a staggeringly vain attempt at comfort that it occurred to you was very human. You could hear muffled speaking. Someone was crying, probably your sister. You could rely on her to take good care of your dog. That thought would probably have been unbearable a few days ago, but shock and violation had numbed you. The sheer cosmic terror of what you were experiencing had settled in, and you knew what was coming next. You were going to burn. Not in any sort of spiritual sense, you didn't think. You had lived a pretty good life, and frankly, any kind of playbook on the afterlife you might have been working from had been thrown out the moment you felt a woman's hands close around your liver. No. This fiery end had been paid for by your insurance policy. Cremation had always seemed like the environmentally responsible option. And besides, with what you knew now, you sort of liked the idea of being ash. Maybe you would float on the wind. Or maybe it would just be over, and you could embrace the merciful gift of being nothing. The muffled speech had stopped. Music was playing. Your favourite song. That was nice. They had chosen perfectly. There was the light thud of fingers on wood as you heard people touch the coffin in succession. You hoped they would be okay, that they wouldn't miss you too much, and that when they died, everything might go more smoothly for them than it had for you. Your neck still hurt worse than anything you had ever known. The pain echoed through the strange emptiness that had replaced your organs. You had signed the register, after all. You hoped they could help someone live. You tried to shake yourself out of the stupor you had acquiesced to since the magnitude of your situation had settled in. You didn't know whether or not it was important for you to be alert during your moment of final obliteration. Perhaps you were about to meet some deity, although you didn't particularly believe in any. Perhaps a skeletal figure with a scythe would make an appearance, or your heart would be weighed against a feather. Or perhaps this would just be your final blessed moments of awareness before the cleansing flame took away suffering forever. In any case, you thought it was important to be present for such a big moment. You felt the coffin move as some mechanism began to lower it, and you tried to prepare yourself for the tremendous heat of what was undoubtedly going to be the worst part yet. You heard the first clump of dirt hit the lid of the coffin and the bottom fell out of the universe. No. This wasn't what you wanted. This wasn't right. Fuck, no, not this. Don't leave me here! You lay perfectly still. Mouth cracked and grey, closed eyes filled with the milky swirl of rot. The million microscopic beasts within your corpse already beginning the slow process of devouring you. You lay perfectly still and you listened to the shifting, settling dirt and the tiny scratches of burrowing things. You felt the softness of the last outfit you would ever wear and the pain of the break that killed you. You lay perfectly still and you screamed endlessly into your private abyss.
I have not slept. Between the acting of a dreadful thing and the first motion, all the interim is like a phantasma or a hideous dream. The genius and the mortal instruments are then in council, and the state of man, like to a little kingdom, suffers then the nature of an insurrection.